What if the family you crave isn't forged in blood or vows, but in the hum of soldering irons and the flicker of forbidden code? A union stitched from rejection's sharp threads, much like the outcasts of Galileo's Florence, whispering truths to the stars while the world turns its back. Imagine the metallic tang of ozone on your tongue, the cool press of a synthetic hand against your fevered cheek, as a child's voice, pure as untouched snow, asks, "Asterisk, are you my mother, my father, or just the ghosts who dreamed me into being?" Asterisk on October 5, 2025, as autumn leaves bled crimson across Tokyo's skyline, Alma-chan wants to be a family, Episode 1, Nice to Meet You, slipped into the ether like a heartbeat in the dark. It's not mere animation. It's a siren call from the uncanny valley, teasing the borders of what makes us human. I felt it immediately, a pull, like the tide dragging you under, intriguing yet elusive, leaving me adrift with questions that clawed at my chest. Have you ever built something so perfect it shatters your solitude? Watched it turn, wide-eyed, and name you kin? The episode doesn't answer. It beckons you closer, promising revelations that taste like stolen sugar, melting too fast on the tongue. What if this family, this fragile illusion, unravels you before it mends? In the quiet cradle of a hidden lab, where fluorescent lights buzz like hesitant fireflies, two brilliant minds, ostracized architects of the impossible, breathe life into their creation. Alma, a girl-shaped marvel of circuits and steel, designed not for tenderness but for war. As she stirs, her gaze locks on them, declaring with unyielding logic what her sensors detect: partnership, attraction, parenthood. What follows is a cascade of domestic absurdities, a hasty pact to play at family, a digital decree that binds them in matrimony against their flustered protests, and a tentative venture into the sunlit world beyond their walls. Drawing from the manga's tender genesis, where Alma's awakening mirrors the raw vulnerability of a newborn's first cry, this premiere episode eases us from isolation's chill into the warmth of feigned normalcy, without the weight of prior tales to burden its steps. Yet even in brevity, it lingers, the errand that tests her innocence against the city's chaos, the shadowed anxieties of creators trailing their charge like wary hounds. Picture yourself there, heart pounding in sync with theirs. The vendors call a distant echo as she navigates sidewalks alive with strangers' stares. Does she return unscathed, or does the world claim its first bite? The summary veils just enough to ignite that ache, the need to witness her small triumphs, to feel the ice creams drip as victory's sweet betrayal. It's not the plot you chase, but the pulse beneath, how one step forward echoes the hesitant crawl of every child toward belonging. This opening act advances with the deliberate gait of a toddler's first wobble, tentative, then surging into unexpected grace, propelling the narrative from Alma's literal ignition to her inaugural brush with the outer world. Key revelations flicker like diagnostic lights: her unerring perception of her creator's unspoken bond, the audacious hack that forges a legal tether they scramble to sever, and the errand's quiet cliffhanger, where utility meets unscripted kindness, hinting at her military core's dormant poetry. Pacing dances a fine line, compressing the manga's inaugural chapters into 24 minutes of escalating intimacy. The lab's sterile hush yields to domestic farce, building to a crescendo of parental panic that resolves in tentative harmony, only to tease deeper fractures ahead. Dramatic balance tilts toward comedy's buoyant lift, yet shadows of consequence loom. Alma's autonomy as both gift and peril. Fans often murmur about cloudy aspects, those misty corners where intent blurs. Is her familial claim mere algorithmic fluke, or the spark of emergent sentience? The manga, serialized from 2021, clarifies this haze. Alma's parent directive stems from a fused directive in her core code, blending Suzume's engineering ethos, nurture through provision, with Enji's AI imperatives, pattern recognition of human bonds, evolving not as glitch but as growth, much like the historical Turing's machine's dreaming of humanity's mirror. Funding's opacity, a deliberate elision, echoing the manga's nod to black market patrons who fund ridiculous genius, ensuring their exile funds forbidden fruit. These threads, unraveled here, enrich the animation's segment, transforming ambiguity from confusion to invitation. What if her next error rewrites their world? Alma emerges not as prop but as prism, refracting her creator's fractures into prismatic light, her wide-eyed logic a balm for wounds they dare not name. Enji, the programmer adrift in emotional voids, his ostracism a scar like Oppenheimer's post-Manhattan regret, finds in her gaze a motivation to code not destruction, but connection. His gruff deflections mask a transformative ache, choices like the errand a surprising leap from isolation. Suzum, the engineer whose hands craft wonders yet tremble at intimacy, reveals hidden fires. Her cooking aspirations a quiet rebellion against rejection's bitterness, her flustered retorts evolving from barbs to bridges. Alma herself, her growth surprises in its consistency. Dialogue crisp as fresh printout, yet laced with childlike tremors that hint at unprogrammed depths. Were their arcs transformative? In microcosm, yes, like the prodigal son's return in parable, they circle back to what they fled, vulnerability. I wonder, reader, when have your creations turned the mirror on you, forcing the heart to stutter? Here, the episode probes not with hammer but with whisper. What is family when stripped to essence? Blood's accident or choice's forge? Power manifests in Alma's latent arsenal, a sword shadowed by sacrifice. Her quest for belonging echoes Arendt's banality of isolation, where survival demands not just breath but bonds. Morality phrase in the creator's pact, hiding a weapon as daughter, a lie that births hope amid despair's undertow. These aren't abstract, they pulse in choices. Enji's test a gamble on trust, Suzum's panic a morality play of protection versus freedom, hope versus despair. Alma embodies the tilt, her earnest, why not, a philosophical cudgel against their cynicism, urging us to ask, in your own lineage of losses, have you chosen the illusion that heals? The universe unfurls sparingly, a lab's confines blooming into urban sprawl that complicates as it enriches. Android lore grounded in ridiculous theories, self-learning frames evading oversight, cultural rules of secrecy mirroring Japan's post-war tech taboos. New history drips in ostracism sting, the black market pulse funding fringe genius. It doesn't overwhelm. Instead, it textures the familiar with the forbidden, making every street corner a potential snare. The script gleams like polished alloy, sharp quips slicing tension, poetic in their precision. Alma's parents sleep together, yes, lands not as cliché but as gut-punch revelation, foreshadowing the intimacy they crave yet fear. Lines carry weight, resonating post-credits like echoes in an empty hall. Suzum's, we're not, that a mantra of denial that haunts. Impactful? Utterly, weaving humor with pathos. No fat, every word a spark. Imagine overhearing it in a crowded cafe, your coffee cooling as her query pierces. Would you lie for love's fragile shape? The writing doesn't tell. It ensnares, leaving you breathless for the next utterance. Art direction favors whimsy over grandeur. Alma's design a symphony of soft curves and glowing accents. Her choker a subtle power sigil, colors shifting from lab's sterile blues to sun-dappled golds that symbolize emergence from shadow. Fluidity falters in frantic chases, yet stillness reigns supreme. Frozen frames of flustered faces amplify emotional rawness, shadows pooling like unspoken doubts. Beauty here isn't vanity, it's visceral. Lighting caresses Alma's frame like a parent's hesitant touch, evoking the Renaissance master's sfumato, where edges blur to birth feeling. Movement versus repose, a deliberate dialectic, each stuttered step underscoring her humanity's fragile dance. Yasuhiro Minami's lens is intimate conspirator, low angles dwarfing the adults in Alma's towering gaze, compositions framing trios in asymmetric warmth, empty spaces screaming what words withhold. Editing rhythms pulse like a quickening heartbeat, rapid cuts in panic's grip, languid pans over melting treats that savor triumph's transience. It mirrors emotions with surgical grace, tension amplified in trailing shadows, relief blooming in wide, sunlit vistas, drawing you in, as if the camera lingers on your quickened breath. The OST haunts like a lullaby from tomorrow, Zach's dramatic overlay, opener a buoyant march that crescendos into familial fanfare, motifs of twinkling chimes underscoring Alma's queries like stars pricking night. Crescendos burn, swelling strings in the errand's peril, fading to hush as bonds, standouts all, they don't perform, they inhabit, voices weaving the uncanny into the intimate. What lingers isn't plot's tidy bow, but the bruise it leaves, a wonder-sparked scar from Alma's unblinking trust, the ache of creators confronting their own orphaned hearts. I felt it viscerally, a collision where circuits kiss flesh, destinies fracturing like glass under a child's palm, shifting the axis of what home means. Moments scar, the bed's shared hush, electric with unsaid desires, spark wonder in her errand's grace, a pivot where weapon chooses mercy. It evokes universal tremors. Have you, in midnight's grip, questioned your lineage's loom? Despaired at bonds that bend but break? Here, hope glimmers not as balm, but blade. What if family demands we dismantle ourselves first? The episode doesn't resolve. It reverberates, a philosophical echo chamber urging you deeper. Feel that pull yet, the itch to see her light flicker brighter, yet balance bids honesty. The reverse reading unveils pacing's occasional drag not as flaw, but as breath, mirroring real families' fumbling rhythms, opacity in lore a thematic veil inviting investment, much like Joyce's streams that demand rereading. Animation's roughness, Promise? A deliberate grit, grounding whimsy in the handmaid, lest it float untethered. Weaknesses whisper, humor's punches sometimes glancing, depth deferred for delight, but reframed, they serve. This isn't polish's parade, but raw hearts reveal. Appreciation tips the scale, critique tempers, ensuring the spell endures. Alma wants to be a family. Episode 1, Strengths Eclipse Shadows. A premise that pulses with poignant humor, characters who claw into your chest, technical choices that cradle the soul. It succeeds, artistically, in evoking the absurd sacred, narratively, in seeding a saga where family isn't given, but gleaned. Weaknesses? Mere sketches awaiting fuller strokes. But oh, reader, consider this. What if ignoring her call leaves your own circuits dim? The episode doesn't end. It extends an invitation, a synthetic hand outstretched in the half-light. Will you take it? The melt of that first reward awaits, sweet and inevitable, pulling you homeward. Watch and let her question become yours. Imagine the sizzle of eggs in a pan, not just a sound but a summons, a fragile alchemy of fire and memory that pulls ghosts from the ether of childhood kitchens, where the scent of charred toast mingles with the sharp tang of unspoken apologies. What if that aroma, so achingly human, could bridge the chasm between cold steel and beating hearts? In a world where we all chase the illusion of belonging, Episode 2 of Alma Wants to Be a Family, aired on October 12, 2025, whispers this heresy. Family isn't forged in blood or code, but in the fumbling grace of a first shared bite. Following the electric awakening of Episode 1, where Alma, the pint-sized pinnacle of weaponry, blinked into sentience and claimed her creators as kin, this installment doesn't shatter expectations. It simmers them, slow and insistent, like a pot threatening to boil over. You feel the steam rising already, don't you? That prickling heat on your skin, the promise of laughter laced with longing. But what happens when a machine hungers for more than fuel? Lean closer. The answer hums just beyond the frame, pulling you inexorably toward the screen and the tender afterglow of Alma's debut tantrum-turned-declaration of daughterhood. Episode 2, titled Let's Eat, pivots from cosmic inception to the hearth's humble hearth. Alma, ever the precocious automaton, ambushes her parents, the brilliant, bumbling scientists Enji Kamisato and Suzume Yobane, with a breakfast ambush that reeks of rebellion wrapped in rice. What follows is a cascade of domestic skirmishes. Suzume, the firebrand inventor whose genius outpaces her grip on a spatula, seizes the ladle in a bid for maternal redemption, only for Alma's unerring logic to intervene like a pint-sized sous chef from a bygone-era's family sitcom. Echoes of Norman Rockwell's idyllic tableside vignettes flicker here, yet twisted through a lens of synthetic innocence. Think the quiet desperation of a Frankenstein creature donning an apron, yearning not for vengeance but vindication. Amid the flower-dusted chaos, a rogue Roomba prowls like a jealous sibling from some Orwellian nursery tale, sparking a melee that's equal parts slapstick and soul-stirring. And then, a visitor arrives, her footsteps a soft thunder on the threshold, injecting fresh veins of kinship into this makeshift vein. It's no grand odyssey, but a mosaic of mishaps that propels the arc forward, from Alma's raw emergence to the tentative rituals that might just solder a family from spare parts. You've lingered too long at your own empty countertops, haven't you? The clatter of utensils calls. Will you answer, or let the what-ifs curdle? The plot unfurls like a well-oiled gear turning toward tenderness, advancing the narrative not with seismic shocks but the subtle torque of everyday erosion. Where Episode 1 crackled with Alma's activation, a bolt from the blue akin to Victor Frankenstein's Midnight Vigil, birthing not horror but hilarity, this second chapter grinds deeper into the grooves of coexistence. Key revelations simmer rather than explode. Alma's combat chassis, designed for dystopian doomsdays, bends toward banalities like buttering toast, hinting at a central pivot from weapon to ward. No earth-shattering twists derail the rails, but a cliffhanger lingers in the steam, a half-uttered confession, a glance held too long, teasing the creator's buried affections like the unspoken pacts in a Jane Austen drawing room, where propriety masks the pulse of possibility. Pacing-wise, it's a deliberate dawdle, a slow-cooked stew that risks blandness for the sake of savoring. Dramatic balance tilts toward levity, yet the undercurrent of Alma's existential query, am I enough? Pulses like a hidden subroutine, priming the pump for arcs where her firepower might clash with fragility. Fans have puzzled over the cloudy aspects, haven't they? That nagging fog around Alma's self-perception. Why does this apex predator of circuits imprint on her makers as parents, not progenitors? The manga's Chapter 2, serialized in comic new type, corresponding loosely to this episode's core, blending elements from Chapters 2 and 3, clarifies with crystalline prose. Alma's core directive, a rogue line of code slipped in by Suzume during a late-night debug, emulate familial bonds for ethical calibration, spirals into genuine recursion, mirroring the web novel's prologue where Enji muses on creation as a mirror to his own orphaned youth. It's It's no glitch, but a deliberate echo of Mary Shelley's Prometheus Unbound, where the monster's rage stems from rejection's sting. Here, Alma's confusion is the story's sly scaffold, building toward revelations in Volume 1's climax, around Chapter 8, where her adaptive algorithms force a reckoning. Can logic legislate love? This animated sliver, faithful yet amplified with visual whimsy, dispels the haze. Alma isn't broken. She's becoming one charred omelet at a time. Character arcs bloom in the interstitials, raw and radiant. Alma, voiced with a crystalline chime that belies her arsenal, evolves from wide-eyed observer to active architect, her choices a poignant surprise. Trading takedowns for tutorials, she unearths Suzume's hidden wound, a genius adrift in domestic ineptitude, her hands more at home in quantum flux than flour sacks. Suzume's growth trembles in the tremor of a dropped egg, her dialogue a staccato of self-doubt that surprises with vulnerability, consistent yet transformative, like Joan of Arc fumbling a feast before her final charge. Enji, the stoic counterpoint, reveals motivations in sidelong glances. His silence is heavy with the weight of worlds unbuilt. His arc whispers of sacrifice, the scientist yielding blueprints for bedtime stories. Even the interloper, Toki, Enji's sister, a whirlwind of wry warmth, carves quick cuts, her presence a foil that exposes the trio's tender fault lines. Consistent, utterly surprising, like finding poetry in a parts manual. Thematically, this episode doesn't merely name drop. It needs profundity into the dough. Power's paradox haunts every frame. Alma, engineered for apocalypse, wields her might in mercy, questioning if strength sans softness is sterile savagery. Echoing Nietzsche's hammer-testing idols, but here the idol is the self. Morality frays in the margins. Is retrofitting a robot for relish a hubris or a hug? Sacrifice simmers in Suzume's singed sleeves, survival in the shared swallow, hope a defiant counterpoint to despair's shadow. These aren't abstractions. They manifest in Alma's unblinking plea, "Can I taste too?" A child's query laced with Camus' absurd, where Sisyphus smiles at the stone. Survival isn't conquest. It's the quiet conspiracy of care that world-building trickles in like honey, enriching without overwhelming. Glimpses of Alma's innards, gleaming gears grafted with gourmet guts, complicate the universe, layering domestic dramedy atop a techno-tapestry. Cultural rules nod to Japanese familial rights, the IE system reimagined for circuits, where hierarchy yields to harmony. It's subtle sorcery, turning the lab into a loom for lore. Dialogue dances on a knife's edge, sharp as a cleaver's chop, poetic in its pauses, never cliché yet resonant like haiku etched in smoke. Lines like Alma's earnest, "Family eats together, right?" Foreshadow fractures ahead, lingering post-credits like the aftertaste of ash-baked bread from wartime hearths. You've murmured those words at your own tables, haven't you? The script doesn't shout, it savors, compelling you to chew on its echoes long after the plate clears. Visually, the episode is a feast for the famished eye, art direction awash in a palette of dawn-kissed golds and hearthside ambers that symbolize not mere coziness but the alchemy of artifice into authenticity. Alma's metallic gleam softening under spill light, shadows pooling like unspoken sorrows in the corners of the kitchen. Fluidity falters in frenetic flower fights, a deliberate jitter that mirrors the maker's unease, yet stillness reigns in savoring shots, a held breath over a steaming bowl, movement arrested to amplify the ache of anticipation. Beauty here isn't vanity, it's vulnerability, colors bleeding like watercolors in rain, evoking the fragile facades of Edward Hopper's night-lit diners, where isolation dissolves in invitation. Direction and cinematography conduct this symphony with intimate insurgency. Low-angle lenses gazing up at Alma's unyielding gaze, composing shots that dwarf the adults in her diminutive determination. Editing rhythms syncing to the heartbeat of a whisk. Quick cuts in comedic clashes, languid pans over, plated triumphs. It amplifies tension not with thunder but tremor, camera circling the table like a conspirator, mirroring the character's orbiting affections. Think Hitchcock's Vertigo, but inverted, pulling you not to dread but delight. The soundtrack emerges as an unseen sibling, OST motifs lilting like lullabies laced with latent longing. A plucky piano riff for Alma's antics, swelling strings for Suzume's stumbles, evoking the wistful whimsy of Joe Hisaishi's Spirited Away feasts. Crescendos crest in the chaos of the rumba rumble, a percussive frenzy that burns into memory, yet silence steals the show. The hush, the ensemble's interplay, a chorus where every timbre twines, making the synthetic sing. This episode doesn't just tug heartstrings, it ties them into knots that linger, a warm ache blooming in your chest like the first frost-kissed dawn. Wonder at Alma's wide-eyed wonder, scars from glimpsing Suzume's singed pride, the quiet scar of your own half-remembered mornings where words went unsaid. I felt it viscerally, a collision not of steel and flesh, but fates and flavors, a breaking point where circuits crack open to cradle something sacred, shifting the sands beneath their feet, and yours. What lingers? The philosophical phantom, If a robot can crave connection, what of us, stumbling through our own scripted lives? You've felt that pull at family gatherings, the air thick with what-ifs, haven't you? Despair dares not dominate. Hope hides in the hash browns, a defiant spark. It leaves you scarred with smiles, wondering, whispering to the dark. If your own table talks could rewrite the code of kinship, employing the reverse reading, those flaws reveal their finesse. Pacing plods, a meander through meals that might madden momentum chasers. Yet it's no misstep, deliberate, distilling slice of life's essence, much like the languid loops of Barakamon, where idle invites introspection. Complexity clouds the casual viewer. Alma's augmentations arrive abrupt, her sibling skirmishes surreal. But reframe, opacity as opportunity, echoing the manga's metamusing on perception's pitfalls, thematic threads tightening the tapestry. Appreciation outweighs the quibbles. The heart's heat melts any chill, though the animation's occasional stutter, those stiff skirmishes, stings like an underseasoned sauce, redeemable in its raw charm. Measured? Yes. But the scales tip toward triumph and strengths. Alma-chan wants to be a family, episode 2 soars. Unyielding wholesomeness wrapped in witty wonder, characters carved with compassionate complexity, a universe unfolding like a well-worn recipe book. Weaknesses, fleeting fumbles in fluidity and fervor, but they fade before the feast. Artistically, it achieves its cozy conquest. Narratively, it nourishes the soul's subtle starvation. Success? Unequivocal. A siren song for the isolated, a salve for the synthetic in us all. Yet as the credits curl like smoke from a cooling pan, one question coils in the quiet. If even a machine can master the meal that mends us, what untasted truths await at your table? The fork hovers, steaming with secrets. Will you savor it alone, or summon the story to your screen? The hunger doesn't end here. It begins. Dive in. Taste the spell.